When Owen spotted thick black cables slipping out from under his front steps, he thought it was just old wiring. But when curiosity got the better of him, he dug deeper, only to uncover a hidden hatch beneath the house. Descending with a flashlight, he discovered a secret chamber humming with strange black boxes, their lights still blinking after decades. His family froze in fear when he showed them. Yet the cables didn't end there. They stretched beyond the chamber, leading into the woods, towards something none of them were prepared to face. Before we go any further, if this is your first time here, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us until the end, and if this mystery moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and pass it along to a friend. He noticed it on a Saturday, kneeling to sweep grit off the front steps. A thin black line, like a vein, slipped from a hairline crack in the concrete and vanished beneath the riser. He pinched it with 2 fingers. Cool, rubbery, not brittle like old TV wire. When he tugged, it didn't budge. It pulsed faintly against his skin, not with electricity, but with tension, as if something on the other end refused to let go. This was Owen's house, the one he'd promised to fix up board by board. Paint splatters on his sneakers, a crescent of drywall dust under each fingernail, grocery lists taped to the fridge beside a penciled budget that never quite balanced. He brushed his knuckles on his jeans, leaned closer. The cable disappeared into darkness where the step met the dirt. The smell down there was damp wood and cold soil. He told himself it was nothing. Old wiring, maybe an abandoned doorbell line. Still, his breath hitched. He slid a flathead under the edge, pried a splinter free. Another cable slipped into view, identical, slick with dust. 2 lines now, parallel. Intentional. Across the street, the neighbors watered a stubborn patch of lawn, pretending not to watch. You know that vibe. Heads tilted, voices low. Guys always tinkering, one said. If it ain't broke, the other shrugged. Those steps been sagging for years. He'll make it worse. Owen heard the hiss of the hose, the click of the nozzle, their small talk threading the quiet like static. He fetched a flashlight. The beam trembled. He steadied it with his wrist against the riser. The light picked out webs, a curled leaf. Then, there, a shallow furrow in the soil where the cables ran side by side, pressed into the earth like rails. They weren't frayed. They weren't spliced. They were new enough to make his jaw tighten. Inside, the house ticked and settled, old pipes knocking once like a warning. He swallowed, thumb rubbing a groove in the screwdriver handle, a nervous micro-movement he didn't notice. Wow, okay. Curiosity hooked him behind the ribs. He could walk away, pretend he never saw it. But the lines were right there, patient, waiting, as if they'd been installed for someone exactly like him, the kind who can't leave a question unanswered. He told himself he'd look for 5 minutes, just trace where the cables went under the first step. Then he'd stop. He'd be sensible. He'd forget it. He slid the flashlight deeper. The beam caught something else he hadn't expected. Packed soil smoothed by hands, not time. And the cables kept going. Owen pulled back from the step, wiped his palms on his jeans, and sat on the porch rail, his breath fogged in the cool air. The cables hadn't been chewed by rodents, hadn't cracked with age. They looked alive in a way, stretched taut into the earth like they had purpose. When he mentioned it at dinner, covering over his plate, his wife just raised an eyebrow. Probably old wiring. Forget about it, Owen. Don't turn this into one of your projects. His teenage son smirked, tossing in, Maybe it's treasure, Dad. Dig it up, we'll be rich. Laughter around the table, but Owen didn't laugh. The next morning, gossip bloomed like weeds. At the hardware store, 2 men leaned near the counter, voices low but sharp enough to carry. Saw him crouched under his steps with a flashlight. The other chuckled. Wouldn't surprise me if he blows a fuse poking where he shouldn't. They didn't know Owen was standing an aisle away, staring at lengths of PVC pipe, pretending not to hear. Even neighbors got in their digs. While trimming hedges, the man next door muttered just loud enough. Some people can't leave well enough alone. His wife nodded. You start pulling at things like that, you never know what you'll uncover. Owen forced a polite smile whenever the subject surfaced, but the truth was different. Every idle comment, every chuckle behind his back, only sharpened his resolve. He could feel those cables pulling at him when he lay awake at night. No one else seemed to care where they led. But for Owen, dismissing it wasn't an option anymore. The question had already rooted in him, and it wasn't letting go. By the 3rd night, Owen couldn't sleep. The image of those cables gnawed at him, the way they vanished neatly into the soil, too deliberate to ignore. At 6 a.m., before the sun had burned the mist off the yard, he was already outside with a spade in one hand and his old work gloves in the other. The first shovelful broke the crust of earth beneath the steps with a dull scrape. Damp dirt clung to the blade, smelling of iron and rot. He leaned into the work, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. Each dig revealed more of the black lines, slithering downward in a slow, steady curve, like snakes burrowed by choice. By noon, he'd carved out a trench that traced several feet past the stairs. The cables didn't fray. They didn't stop. They ran deeper, disappearing beneath packed soil that looked too smooth, too compact, as if someone had laid it carefully to hide them. Owen crouched low, tracing the dirt off one line with his thumb. His gloves were streaked, his jeans caked with mud at the knees. His breath came shallow, the air heavy with the smell of damp clay. He pressed his ear close, just for a second, and swore he heard something faint, like a hum, or maybe just his pulse pounding too hard in his head. From the sidewalk, a pair of neighbors slowed to watch. One muttered, "He's still at it." The other chuckled, "Told you, obsessed. Man's gonna dig a tunnel to nowhere." Their voices carried, mocking, but Owen didn't rise to it. He kept his eyes on the trench, heart snagged on a single thought. If these were just dead wires, why were they buried so deep, and why could he still see the faintest sheen of moisture on them, as though they'd been touched or used not long ago? His spade struck something hard then, clink. He froze, cleared the soil with trembling hands. The cables disappeared straight beneath a slab of concrete, not natural, but shaped, square-edged, and in its center, a faint groove, like a hatch waiting to be opened. That concrete slab under the soil gnawed at Owen's thoughts like a splinter under skin. He couldn't pass the front steps without staring at the trench, without imagining what lay beneath that hatch-shaped block. Nights grew restless. He'd jolt awake at 2 a.m., slip from bed, and crouch at the window just to check if the cables were still there, as if they might crawl away on their own. His wife caught him once, arms folded at the doorway. "You're losing it, Owen. It's just old junk." He muttered a quick, maybe, but his eyes never left the dark patch of dug-up earth outside. The neighbors noticed, too. At the diner, whispers carried. "You see him out there with a flashlight again?" One man chuckled over coffee. "Looks like he's hunting treasure." A woman snorted. "Treasure? More like trouble. Those wires'll fry him if curiosity don't kill him first." Even at work, he found his hands restless, tracing imaginary lines across the desk, fingers twitching like they still gripped the spade. Micro-movements betrayed him, adjusting his sleeves, rubbing his thumb raw against his palm. He was supposed to be fixing gutters, repainting the fence, being the steady father and husband he'd promised. Instead, all he could think about was that hatch. Every warning, every sideways glance only pushed him deeper. He had to open it. The morning he finally gave in, the sky was low and gray, clouds sagging as if the world itself was holding its breath. Owen stood over the slab, shovel discarded beside him, fingers flexing inside stiff gloves. He'd spent days brushing soil away from the edges, tracing the faint groove until it looked like a square outline begging to be lifted. He wedged his crowbar into the crack and leaned. At first, nothing, just the groan of strained metal. Then, slowly, the slab shifted, releasing a hiss of stale, damp air that smelled like rust and something older, something sealed away too long. His breath caught. He pried harder, sweat slicking his brow. With a final grunt, the hatch gave way, tipping enough to expose a black void beneath the steps. His flashlight beam wavered as he angled it down, catching motes of dust dancing in the stagnant air. Below, narrow wooden planks formed a crude ladder disappearing into darkness. The cables ran alongside the boards, vanishing into the throat of the passage. They glistened faintly, as if sweat had gathered on their surface. Owen's heart drummed in his ears. He leaned closer, the flashlight beam trembling in his grip. The silence below wasn't natural. It pressed against him, thick and absolute, broken only by the faintest hum he couldn't place. Behind him, a voice startled him. The neighbor, standing at the fence, called out with a chuckle. "Digging to China, Owen?" Another voice joined. "Careful, man, you don't know what's down there." They laughed, shaking their heads, but Owen didn't laugh. He didn't even answer. His gaze was fixed on that ladder, on the darkness waiting below. Curiosity outweighed fear, and as his foot touched the first rung, the wood groaned, carrying his weight down into a place no one in his family had ever known existed. The ladder creaked under Owen's weight, each rung slick with years of damp. His flashlight beam cut narrow swaths through the darkness, dust motes swirling like ash. The smell hit him first. Damp earth mixed with metal, sharp and tangy, almost like blood on old iron. When his boots met the packed floor, the air felt heavier, cooler, pressing against his skin. The cables snaked along the wall, neatly threaded through rusted hooks, as if someone had guided them intentionally. They gleamed faintly, beads of condensation sliding down their length. He turned in a slow circle, light bouncing across rough stone walls. The space wasn't natural. It was carved, shaped. Cobwebs hung thick in corners, clinging to his jacket as he brushed past. His breath echoed louder than it should have, bouncing strangely, like the room was larger than it appeared. A drop of water plinked somewhere deeper, rhythmic, steady. The cable stretched toward the sound, pulling him further in. His hand tightened on the flashlight, thumb rubbing the switch in a nervous twitch. Above him the hatch sat ajar, the faintest square of daylight staring down like a watchful eye. He realized how far that patch of light seemed already, and how alone he suddenly was. Still, he followed the cables. Owen followed the cables into a narrow corridor, the beam of his flashlight shaking as he shuffled forward. The walls closed in, damp stone pressing the smell of wet soil into his nose. His boots scraped grit across the floor, each step echoing too loudly in the stillness. Then, the passage widened. His light spilled into a low chamber, and what it revealed made his throat tighten. At the center sat a cluster of black boxes, stacked neatly like forgotten luggage. They were covered in dust, yet thin green lights blinked faintly on their faces, alive. Wires threaded out from them in bundles, looping up into the ceiling, vanishing into darkness. A low hum vibrated through the floor, so subtle he felt it more than he heard it, buzzing up through his boots into his legs. He crouched, fingers brushing the nearest box. It was warm. Warm. In this cold, damp room. That was impossible. His hand jerked back. The flashlight beam danced across the walls, picking out strange marks scratched into the stone. Lines, arrows, maybe letters, but the damp had blurred them. His heart skipped. These weren't random carvings. Someone had been down here, marking, mapping, leaving traces. A drip echoed again, but closer now, like the space itself was breathing. He adjusted his sleeve, a nervous tick, and wiped the sweat from his lip. Wow. Behind him, he swore he heard a sound. Something faint, a shuffle of weight, like a foot dragging just out of sight. He whipped the flashlight around, the beam slicing through dust. Nothing. Only the hatch's square of daylight far back in the tunnel, smaller now, more distant than he wanted to admit. Owen swallowed, heart pounding, eyes back on the machines. This wasn't abandoned. Someone had left it here, and maybe someone was still watching. Owen crouched lower, the flashlight balanced on his knee, eyes locked on the blinking boxes. The hum wasn't random. It pulsed in steady waves, mechanical, deliberate. His breath slowed as the truth slid into place. This wasn't part of his house. It never had been. The age of the stone, the way the chamber had been carved, the cables neatly strung through hooks, all of it felt planned, engineered. Someone had built this long before he ever bought the place, maybe before his family even knew this street existed. He traced one cable with his fingers, following it along the wall until it disappeared into a tight conduit. The insulation was newer than the house's wiring. No fray, no corrosion. Someone had maintained this. Recently, he sat back hard against the wall, a sharp shiver running through him. Maybe the neighbors' mocking had been more than jokes. Maybe they'd known something they never said. His thumb rubbed his palm in a nervous loop. What had he just uncovered? Not bad wiring, not junk. Something hidden, humming right beneath the lives of everyone upstairs. It wasn't his home that owned the cables. It was the cables that owned his home. That night, Owen couldn't hold it in. He gathered his wife and son at the kitchen table, the flashlight lying between them like a loaded gun. His words tumbled out. Hatch, ladder, cables, humming machines. At first, they stared at him like he'd gone too far this time. But when he led them outside and pulled the slab fully open, the truth stared back at them. His wife gasped as the damp air rolled up from the passage. She covered her mouth, whispering, "No, this isn't right." His son, trying to mask fear with bravado, leaned over the hatch. "Wow, Dad, it's like something out of a movie." But his voice cracked at the end, betraying him. Reluctantly, they followed Owen down the ladder. The moment the flashlight beam fell on the chamber, the mood shifted. His wife froze in the doorway, eyes wide at the blinking boxes. "Owen, we shouldn't be here. Her voice trembled. She clutched her son's arm as if the machines might come alive. The boy whispered, "What are they? Radios? Computers?" But the question hung heavy. The humming was too strange, too steady. His wife shook her head, whispering again, "Who put this here?" On their way back up, voices carried faintly from outside. "The neighbors. He's got them all digging now." One laughed. Another murmured, "Told you nothing good ever comes from that house." Inside, the family gathered in the living room, the hum from below still faintly audible through the floorboards. No one touched their dinner. No one spoke for long. The air was thick with fear. Finally, Owen's wife broke the silence. "If this was meant to be found, it wouldn't have been hidden. We have to call someone." But Owen only stared at the floor, ears straining to that hum below. Something told him calling the wrong person might make things worse. Days later, Owen returned to the chamber alone. His family begged him not to, but the hum beneath their feet was impossible to ignore. He followed the thickest bundle of cables beyond the boxes, tracing them deeper into a low tunnel he hadn't explored before. The air grew colder as he crawled, flashlight beam jittering across damp stone. His shirt snagged on rough edges, dust clung to his skin. And then, there it was, a jagged opening at the end of the tunnel, half hidden by roots. He pushed through, blinking against sudden daylight. He wasn't under the house anymore. He was at the tree line, on the far edge of the woods behind his property. The cables snaked up from the earth, vanishing into the dense forest. Not broken, not abandoned. They continued. Owen stood there, chest tight, the silence of the trees pressing against him. Whatever was under his house wasn't the end of something. It was only the beginning. What Owen uncovered beneath his home left his family shaken, and the truth of where those cables lead may never be fully explained. But one thing is clear. Some secrets aren't meant to stay buried. If you want more chilling discoveries, hidden places, and stories that keep you up at night, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. The next story might be even closer to home than you think.